here in Aqaba on the Red Sea and haven't been here in about 2 decades, and I haven't snorkeled in 2 decades. And I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to, 1, test the GoPro Hero 11 in the water, which is supposedly waterproof up to 10 meters. I'm not going to go that far. And 2, I'm going to go look for this submerged tank, or al-dabeba, I believe in Arabic. And I'm going to go see how this goes. So let's jump in. Forgot how awkward it is to put these giant flippers on in the water. Okay. All right, I'm gonna kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Submerge the GoPro that I brought all the way from Adorama in Manhattan, and look for this tank. That wasn't too hard. I found it. It's really not too far offshore, and you can see it's got a lot of coral glomming onto it and plenty of fish swimming around. This place is glorious. The Red Sea is as amazing as I remember it. And I'm about to go look for and hopefully check out the fortress, which is one of the principal old landmarks here in the city. Today I'm exploring the Aqaba Fort, alternately known as the Aqaba Castle, which is a ruinous compound here in the city center, right near the Red Sea. And it's a really interesting site, I have to say, if you get into the history of it. I'd been to Aqaba a couple of times in my youth, going back and forth to Egypt and had actually never visited this place before. And yeah, it's actually really cool. It's basically a node in Islamic empires where it acted as a caravanserai, which means in Persian or Farsi, it means a caravan palace. And that was a way station for people going, pilgrims making the Hajj back and forth to Mecca and Medina in the Hijaz, which is western modern day Saudi Arabia. The fort here dates back to the Mamluk period, which were the sultans who ruled Egypt, and they succeeded the Abids. The Abids you may not know by name, but you may, if you know anything about the Crusades or Islamic history, you may know Salah ad-Din. Salah ad-Din was a Kurdish sultan who had defeated the Crusaders in several battles. He is considered a hero in the Middle Ages of Islam, and he founded the Ayyubid Sultanate in Egypt. Now, the Ayyubids were significant because they changed what is now Egypt from a primarily or predominantly Shia society to a Sunni one. Partly why the Ayyubids are important in Islamic history today. The Mamluks had been a caste of slaves in Egypt during the reign of the Ayyubids, and they eventually overthrew the Ayyubids and became the rulers. So the Mamluks had gone from slaves to sultans. Their case is a pretty interesting one, and notably they were certainly not Arabs or Kurds or Persians or anything that we think of as from the historic Muslim world. The Mamluks were primarily descended from what are known as Kipchak Turks, and the Kipchak were a Turkic confederation from the Eurasian steppe that were defeated by the Mongols, and they ended up, it's a bit of a long history, but they ended up being enslaved in Egypt, and they ended up forming an army that both defended Ayyubid Egypt and were also expeditionary in terms of fighting the Crusaders and as well as the Mongols. You know, an interesting aspect of history that the Aqaba Fort reminds me of is how many rulers of Egypt weren't Egyptian, and meaning they weren't ethnic Arabs or Berbers or any peoples of North African or even Levantine origin. The Mamluks were Kipchak Turks, as I mentioned, and when their empire ended, Egypt was taken over by the Ottoman Empire, which was a Turkish and Turkic empire. And this fort here in Aqaba was taken over by the Ottomans after the Mamluk Sultanate ceased to exist. And the fort was used all the way up until the First World War, and it was this was a historic site in the Arab Revolt. Now, some parts here of the fortress are pretty dark to check out, so I'm actually using my phone, the flashlight, to try and navigate some of the infrastructure here. And there we go, back into bright daylight. This certainly was a fortified way station on the pilgrimage trail to the holy sites. And it is built like a proper defensible fort. There is purportedly a theory that the Aqaba Fort actually had its origins during the Crusader period, but that there is nothing in the archaeological record of digs that have been done here to support that idea. I mean, of course, it could have been the case, but there just isn't any evidence to undergird that theory from what I've read. In 1917, when the Arabs defeated the Ottomans in the Arab Revolt in the context of the First World War, the site was formally taken over by the Hashemites. And up there, you can see the Hashemite seal above the door. This is just a really interesting and quiet place to visit here by the seafront. I highly recommend it. Towering above me, and by that I mean way, way above me, is the Aqaba flagpole, and for a little less than 4 years in the 2000s, this was in fact the world's tallest flagpole. It was completed in 2004, and for a little shy of 4 years, King Abdullah of Jordan reigned supreme. And you could be forgiven for thinking, if you'd never been here before or just passed by it, that you would sort of assume way up there it would be the Jordanian flag hoisted high above the Red Sea. But in fact, it is actually the sort of pan-Arab flag of the Arab revolt of the First World War, when the Ottomans were ousted from Aqaba and wider Transjordan. And so this flag was actually surpassed in 2008 by the then dictator of Turkmenistan, Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov, who built a somewhat taller flagpole as he sought to sort of outdo his predecessor, Turkmenbashi. Then a little bit less than, or just over 2 years later, he was outdone by Ilham Aliyev in Azerbaijan, who built an even taller flagpole. And the competition has just kept going. But I thought this is quite a sight in the center of Aqaba. For sunset, I am attempting to go to a very gentrified part of Aqaba that my friend Mohammed in Amman told me about, called Ayla Village, or Ayla Marina. And instead of trying to skate through all the honking and hot traffic, I'm taking a walk along this route sort of between the beach and the main road here, and no one's using it. It's quite nice, and it's shaded, importantly. It's beautiful. I love that this man is farming right across from the beach. Well, once you get outside Aqaba's little city center, it's so quiet. Well, a very friendly security guard kindly informed me that skateboarding was forbidden here in the Marina Village development, which isn't surprising, and I was mainly using my board just to get here anyway before the sunset, which looks like I've done, so I'm happy. This should be fun to check out on a lark. So the first thing that I notice in coming into the development is what looks to be a homage or ripoff of the Al-Maluya, which is the giant minaret in Samarra in neighboring Iraq. I don't know, maybe it's a cute tribute to that, or I guess in the US these days you might call this architectural appropriation. certainly a different side of Jordan that I've been exploring the last 2 weeks. Ayla village feels like a little slice of the UAE here at the very bottom of Jordan. The blue and white motif strikes me as a little reminiscent of the Cyclades in Greece, but the architecture seems to be something of northern coastal Morocco. It's pretty cool. I like the overall designs. I will say this place was well worth the skate from Aqaba city center. It's actually just really fun to kind of walk around and explore. Something that just hit me is that Ayla is the ancient name of Aqaba, and just across the water there you have, behind me, you have the Israeli city of Eilat. And I'm thinking, Ayla, Eilat. There must be some etymological relation between those two terms, the Arabic term and the Hebrew term. There has to be. They just sound too similar. And they're, you know, pretty much in pre-modern times, they're essentially the same place. Ayla manages to balance just a touch of opulence, but without being actually garish. Nice little escape from the hustle and bustle of Aqaba proper before Ramadan hits. I'm skating back into town to get some dinner. And amazingly, there is actually a bike lane that connects Aqaba and Ayla. And thankfully, it's downhill on the way back to Aqaba, so it's a lot less tiring. Behind me is the minaret of the Sharif Hussein Mosque, and part of the reason why I wanted to put this in this episode is that there is a Cyprus tie-in to my previous episodes. So Sharif Hussein was the Sharif and Emir of Mecca, and he later led the Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire, backed by the British. But then when the Saudis took the Hijaz, which is modern-day Mecca, Medina, and Jeddah, which we know to be the core of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the Saudis pressured the British to exile Sharif Hussein from here in Aqaba to Nicosia in Cyprus, where he lived out basically the last phase of his life until he had a stroke. And then he was allowed to return to Amman, essentially to die. So I just thought that was interesting that there's a tie-in from Cyprus all the way to Aqaba. There's so much overlap with Cyprus in this region. It fascinates me. It's part of why I think Cyprus is still such an interesting destination.